and this is the remnants of one of the greatest trees I've ever seen in my life. The oak tree was bigger than the farmhouse itself, and we used to call it the Faraway tree as well, because it looked like the Faraway tree in the Enid Blyton books. Well, we imagined it looked like that. And this tree collapsed, I think, about 4 years ago, and has died. It's very sad, actually, sitting here. It was one of the most extraordinary trees to climb as a child. It had the biggest branches and the most hugest trunk, and there was probably 3, 4, 5 or 6 of us that used to climb it at any one time, and we used to play all the different characters from the Magic Faraway Tree book. Moonface, Mrs. Potts, all those mad characters of Enid Blyton. But it's really quite emotional coming back to this place, because my father sold it, I think, about 10 years ago, and I'd heard that the tree had collapsed, so it's been quite amazing to come back and drive through the Black Spur up towards Lake Eildon to Taggerty, which is just before Alexandra, and come and visit the farmhouse that we used to visit every weekend, and ride motorbikes, horses, traipse through mud and climb oak trees, because the property is full of beautiful oak trees that would have been planted 100, 150 years ago. The house, which is known as Taggerty House, or as the farm as we called it, is still a beautiful timber structure on the property that I think when we bought it was already about 100 years old, and it was a property that was a guest house for travellers, and it was an extraordinary space for kids because it had so many rooms. I think at one point as kids we counted that it had 40 different rooms, and it had about 12 bathrooms throughout the structure, and because there was only a few of us living in the house on the weekend, most of the rooms were vacant, and there was always wasp nests and moths, and of course snakes you have to be careful of in high summer. But we were allowed to, as kids, roam around the house and do whatever we wanted pretty much. In fact, when my parents bought the property, I remember my stepmother saying that when they came and viewed the house, the corridors of the house are so wide and beautiful, old timber structures, that there was cattle actually walking through the house and cow shit everywhere, because it had been vacated for, I think, a couple of decades or something before we occupied it. But we loved it as kids because we could do anything we liked, because our parents were always so busy doing other things on the property, or relaxing or cooking, and we would go off all day and adventure through the property. We were allowed to paint rooms. At one stage there was a room where we had a beautiful box window in the back of it that overlooked actually the oak tree in the distance, and I set it up as a little theatre using old bedspreads and rickety old furniture that was sort of hanging out in the house, and we'd paint the room and paint scenes and hang up drapes and do little shows for our parents. We'd also do typical things that you do on a farm, like go motorbike riding, horse riding. We'd sleep in the hay shed, so we'd build all these cubby holes using all the hay bales and sleep there at night, through winter and summer. We'd camp down on the river, which is the Akron River, along the back of the property. We'd disappear all day. Our parents would let us go all day, which is something that you don't often hear about anymore. You know, with my contemporaries, my friends having children, you very rarely ever hear of them being able to let their kids off all day doing what we did and what we were so lucky to have. Well, my first primary school, and I went to a few, not sure why, because they were all fairly close together. Maybe I kept getting kicked out, I don't know. But my first primary school was Malvern Central Primary, which was actually a beautiful looking school. It's an old Victorian red brick building. My first experience with theatre or performing arts was, that school must have had a performing arts program, and I'm sure they still have them in schools, where a marionette theatre arrived and set up in the school hall, and I was front row. I was so excited to see it, and it was this beautiful marionette theatre, you know, that beautiful Lonely Goater sort of elaborate marionette type theatre, and I remember watching that and being absolutely dazzled by it, and I could see all the feet of the puppet operators up on the little bridge up inside the stage. You know, I was obsessed with how they got up there and how it all worked, and watching all the little sets come in and out. So, you know, I don't know why. I would have been in grade 1 or prep, maybe grade 1, so I would have been, what, 7 or 8? So young, and I don't know why I was so intrigued by it, but I guess any child should be. Any child that's not fascinated by puppets, must be something wrong with them, I reckon. But that was my first really elaborate memory of a beautiful live show. And then there was another theatre, I think it was called the Australian Marionette Theatre in Hawthorne, which then became the Church Theatre. It was in an old church, and that was a marionette theatre as well. So puppets were a little bit of an obsession of mine. So I've created a few of those in my life. I had one, I think I started doing little theatres using like children's building blocks, and I used to paint little closed pegs as little characters. Then I built more elaborate ones as I got older, and then in Blackburn, where I lived with my mother and my stepfather, I started to get a little bit more ambitious, buy materials and cut out little stages and create little drapes, and I'd spend more time on the actual look of the show than the content. So I would try and write scripts and do performances, but they were always lax. They were always a little bit weak on narrative, but they would look beautiful. But they were pretty weak shows. If they ever got reviewed, they would have been canned. So little theatres have always been an obsession of mine. When I went to Blackburn Technical School, which was a wonderful school in that it was very technical orientated, you learnt how to draft. Art class was pretty good. You know, you had to make things out of wood, in woodwork, automotive, all sorts of hands-on proper technical skills that unfortunately a lot of schools don't do anymore. In year 10, at Blackburn Tech, and you can imagine that's quite a rough school. That's where the Blackburn Sharpies were in the 70s. I was a little bit later. I did work experience, which I think kids still do in year 10, and I did work experience at the Victorian State Opera. And all of my friends didn't quite understand why I would even consider doing work experience at an opera company, but I did. And I guess at that age, in year 10, I would have been maybe 14 or 15. I would have, had all these years behind me of building my own little theatres at home, and then I suddenly was exposed to grand opera at a huge scale. Victorian State Opera used to do massive productions. I worked on a show, Don Giovanni, with Kenneth Rao, and he was the set designer on Don Giovanni, and it was a new production. And my work experience for 2 weeks was hanging out in the set workshop of Victorian State Opera, watching the set being built at 14, 15. Now, if I ever hung out on a set with my dad, normally the sets were completed by then, and as I mentioned before, it was all very technical, and to actually spend time at the opera company and watch them build sets from these beautiful thumbnail sketches was quite an amazing experience. I went to ARDOC, and ARDOC was very supportive of the arts and literature, and I only went there for a year, but it really did change my life and exposed me to a lot of other, students that were into similar things. And, we did media studies, which was quite new back then. So we learned how to use video cameras and make little films. And, so I left, finished at ARDOC and did a performing arts course at Paran TAFE, which then became Swinburne. And I did a 2-year course there, focused more on design, performance as well, but mainly design was my focus. And I applied, once I finished that, graduated, I applied for 300 positions, or 300, actually, not 300 positions, I sent out 300 applications around the country for any work in theatre or television, and I got knocked back from everything, nothing was available. And then I got a random call from a props maker at Channel 10 in Melbourne who said that there was a job at Channel 9 where the art department needed an assistant, a junior designer, and I rang them and went and spoke to them and got offered the job on the spot. It would have been the worst paid, very junior role, but wonderful in that the art directors that were running that art department had been working in television since its inception, the late 50s, I think 1956. So I worked as a set designer in television. I wanted to start working in theatre, and I knew someone that knew someone else that was working doing productions at La Mama Theatre in Melbourne, and somehow I think I got involved, helping out with props and stuff, and then the designer of the show fell through, and then they offered me the job to design the sets, so I did that. And we used to work on tiny budgets and do actually quite beautiful work. It's amazing, when the parameters are smaller and there's more constraints financially, you can actually do better work. Not that I'd ever want to tell my clients that. And of course, for me, I had this vision of working in the art department or the theatre of a casino, because I'd seen all these wonderful films as a kid. The Crown announced that they were opening and we're going to have classes and entertainment, and I remember thinking I must get a job there, I have to. If I don't get a job there, I'll change my career, it's not even worth going on with it. And then when the new property was being constructed on South Bank, where the theatres were being built and the ballroom and the restaurants and all that sort of stuff, they then advertised for a creative arts director or a creative arts coordinator. It was quite a sort of junior role. Amongst other things, you know, in the intense interview of having to prove myself to them, one of the things they did ask for was for me to take something in that I'd had made for something. And I had this beautiful top hat made because I used to do female impersonation as a cabaret performer, as a little aside thing, just out of interest. And I had a beautiful top hat made that was absolute perfection. It was the most beautiful hat made by Mandy Murphy, who's a Melbourne milliner that not that many people know about. She's a very under-the-radar milliner, but very, very highly skilled and does beautiful work. And she made this hat for me. Anyway, I took that into the interview, and a beautiful set of tails that were made in this most beautiful red, cherry red wool fabric that I had made to go with the top hat. It was the whole outfit, so it was like the ringmaster outfit that Marlene Dietrich wore. And I took that in with the top hat to the interview and laid them out on the table, and they were like, "Oh, have you made this?" I said, "No, but I directed someone to make them. That's why they're so beautiful." And I got the job.